Here we are back again talking about working memory, and now we're specifically focusing on how to encode information, how to properly transfer it into long-term memory. And we talked about or mentioned rehearsal, which is simply repeating, repetition. And again, I don't want to say that this is not useful, but it's limited. Encoding is usually where most of us need to focus our attention. We already have good habits of rehearsal, looking at things over and over again. But it's a very simplistic technique, and encoding is where we really need to focus. Maintenance rehearsal is simply repeating something over and over again in order to hold it in short-term memory. And you need to be aware of primacy and recency effects when you use rehearsal as a type of encoding technique or storage technique, because you have a tendency to remember the beginning and the end, but most of the stuff in the middle, it gets muddled and lost. Okay, so let's talk about encoding. Driscoll defines this as relating new information to old information. I think that's true. I don't think that's all of it. I think the key to encoding is organization, placing a mark on this content so that it's retrievable later. One way to do that is categorization, placing things in categories. And I gave you the example in class of a grocery list. If I gave you a long grocery list, you could think of a way to categorize that in order to place it in larger chunks, in essence, so that it's easier to remember. And people gave several good examples. The one that's classic is to divide them according to breakfast items, lunch items, and dinner items. Another way to organize information would be through an outline, and I'm sure we've all done that when we've written a paper. You have your Roman numerals for your main points, and then you divide that up. Another form of that would be a hierarchy. You just turn an outline kind of on its side, you get a hierarchy. And I mentioned to you that in the Driscoll book on page 45, she has a very nice hierarchy in the form of a concept tree, which is the principles of behavior management. Mnemonics, I'm sure we can all think of good examples of mnemonics, and some people listed some in class. Holmes, the 5 Great Lakes, okay? Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, and Superior. Okay, it's a mnemonic. Obviously, we've got all the math ones. The one that comes to my mind first is FOIL. When you're dealing with quadratic equations, you multiply the first, then the outer, then the inner, then the last. Okay, and of course, this could be elaborated. Oscar had a hunk of apples. This is from my trigonometry class in high school. Opposite over hypotenuse, that's sine. Adjacent over hypotenuse, that's cosine. And then opposite over adjacent is tangent. Okay. Another way to organize information would be through mediation. Mediation means you're using something in between the information and your mind to organize. Best two examples I can think of would be using a story, placing particularly a well-known story, and placing the information somehow in the story, or making up a new story. You tend to remember story form better than just pure content, bare facts. Another thing would be to relate the information to a place, particularly like a building that has lots of rooms and you're very familiar with. In this case, you're using an already known structure and you're just placing the information inside it in some manner. Another way would be imagery. Having a strange type of image, particularly the more bizarre, striking it is. A picture, a visual image, something like that to help you. All of this is referred to as elaborative encoding because you are elaborating on the information in some way, not just organizing it, but elaborating on it. And to do that, you are processing it in a much deeper manner. You're experiencing a depth of processing. And when you do that, that's much better than just repetition. Well, another way to do that, self-questioning. As you go through, you're reading this material, make up your own questions. See if you can figure out what kind of things I might ask or what might be a good question. It's not just a matter of trying to guess what I'm going to ask, but in the process of thinking about writing your own questions, quizzing yourself, you are again elaborating and processing the information deeply.